Welcome to the program. My name is Vince Nigro. On Insights today, Joe Micallef, one of the top tax experts in the country, former partner at KPMG. We'll talk about the budget, what's happening in the economy in Canada and in your pocket. Joe Micallef on the economy on Insight. Joe Micallef, welcome to the program.
Morning, Vince.
How you
Thanks for
been?
having me. Good, great. Thank you very much.
Since we last talked, obviously in the last little while, Mark Carney, new prime minister, well anticipated his first budget. A lot of folks were anticipating what was going to happen in this budget. Is it going to be a slam dunk, big budget, whatever? I thought it was a bit of a bust. I mean, there was a lot of long-term things that were put in there, like over time. What was your take of Carney's first budget?
Well, there's no doubt that there was a lot of buildup and anticipation. I think there was some fear when some of his speeches leading up to the budget were talking about austerity, and I think some people might have been more concerned about social program cuts and certainly personal tax rate increases. So thankfully, on the good side, I mean, yes, it is a big budget. Certainly, well below what was anticipated. That could be $100 billion deficit, coming in at $72 billion. And obviously, that's going to increase. That's going to decrease slightly over the next 5 years. But that being said, there were no personal tax rate increases, nor were there large program cuts, social program cuts, outside of obviously the federal shrinking of the federal government size. Hopefully, most through attrition and retirements.
Right.
But yes,
The buzzword defense. Obviously, Trump has put a lot of pressure on us in terms of the border, that they protect us, whatever. I noticed that Carney upped the defense budget. There was a little bit of emphasis in terms of pouring some more funds into defense and kind of beefing that up. You think it was just optics, or do you actually really think that we're going to make a move towards beefing up our defense core?
well, there's no doubt that I think we're in a far different environment than we ever had been in 5 years. Clearly, obviously, the world's a very different place. Had it not been for Trump, I think coming up to our 2% target commitment, I think is definitely the right move. Getting to the 5% is going to be a challenge, but certainly, yes, there is a lot of money being poured into the defense side. And, talking about, just even from our own internal intelligence and what is our role going to be going forward. Certainly, we have a lot of procurement areas, some of which was approved and stalled in contracting in the government beforehand. But I do think it's definitely a step in the right direction for our commitments.
So a lot of these budgets obviously have a political component to it. The budgets are going to get passed. It can take down the government. They talked about the opposition combining to take down the government, maybe have an election coming up in the winter. As of right now, when we're taping this show, it seems like it has the support of passing the budget. In the next week or two, there'll be the final vote on it. There have been a couple of folks, one who crossed over, one who's leaving. They're getting slightly closer to a majority, the Liberals. How much of the politics plays into this budget, you think?
Well, I think just as Carney needs to sell the budget to Main Street and Bay Street, there's internally amongst all the parties, I think, whether it's the NDP or the Bloc or the Conservatives, they're all looking for something that certainly is going to tip their hat to support the budget. I don't think the Conservatives are necessarily going to support it, but I do see, the NDP, even with reduced seats, and Quebec obviously supporting the budget. I don't see the budget certainly the government falling over this budget. So, how will things look in the next year or so? It might be a very different story depending on how a lot of these spending programs start to come to fruition. And of course, some of the big builds and infrastructure spend will get approved and go forward. So,
well, as giving us a little bit of an overall view. The average person who's watching this program, or not the average person, but folks who are watching the program, at the end of the day, They sit at their kitchen table, they pay the bills, write a couple checks. Where do you think the trickle down effect is? That are there any positives for the average person, the average Canadian?
So one of the things that was carrying forward was the program to cut the lowest tax rate from 15 to 14 for 2026. This year will come in at 14.5 percent as the lowest tax rate. In terms of large tax reform, which Carney and his platform leading up was advocating that we needed to do something big and bold in order to make Canada more competitive. Certainly, we've fallen behind significantly. None of that's in there. Even on looking at the personal tax side and the reforms that certainly could help a great deal. Again, none of that is in there. The one thing that is fairly new is the fact that they're going to retain, even if the lowest tax rate's falling, the non-refundable tax credits are still going to remain at the 15% up until the end of 2026. So essentially speaking, it won't be, or 2030, I should say. So that won't be as much as a big hit in terms of the value of those tax credits. But again, no, there wasn't any real or new money thrown for tax reform, other than for low income earners. There was a new program introduced about automatic filing. So essentially, a lot of people, which their estimate was around 5.5 million people, aren't filing tax returns and missing out on a lot of refundable programs like GST and things of that nature. So they were going to do that on a automated basis, and people would get their checks quicker and faster.
Can you just explain what that means? Does that mean if someone does not file, it automatically gives that person the return, or okay?
Now, there is obviously a caveat in there that they still need to reach out for consent and approval for that. But again, a lot of people who might go to tax clinics, free tax clinics, and charitable organizations to get those tax returns filed so they can collect some of their benefits which they're owed, won't necessarily need to do that, and they can automatically, because the government has that information. So as long as they're fairly straightforward, routine, yes, they'll essentially file them on their behalf. So.
Right. Joe, 2025 has been an interesting year with tariffs. I want to touch a little bit about the tariffs. The Trump situation, Carney coming into power, the economy is going up and down. The stock market, some days it's at record numbers, and the next day it goes down. It seems like there's been a lot of inconsistencies. I'm talking to a lot of folks that I know, and whether they're in the construction business or even in the hospitality business. Business is not as brisk as it used to be. That extra disposable income is not there. I feel that it's been tightening up. The forecast, a lot of people you're talking to for 2026 feel that it's going to get worse out there. Banks, even though interest rates are reasonable, but they're not giving any money. People are being tighter and tighter. I'm getting calls from people all the time. I got a call the other day from a guy who's got a bath supply company, and he's called me up and said, look, I'm just touching base with you. If you hear of anybody that needs bath supplies, feel free to have them call me. Times are tough. Where do you see 2026 going?
Well, I mean, honestly, I see a big reckoning with respect to pulling back on some of the tariffs that have been levied on us from the U.S., not in the short term. Again, rejigging our economy to embrace other economic relationships, which quite frankly have regardless of the agreements that were entered into in the past, Trans-Pacific, Asian relationships, those really are not large dollars, and certainly. I think it's going to take quite a few years, if not a decade or more, for a lot of that to actually have an impact to reshape what our trade relationships look like to reduce that. Now, that being said, in the budget itself, there was a couple different programs. One, there's a big spend on infrastructure for purposes of facilitating relationships, whether it's on the East Coast or the West Coast. in order to facilitate larger shipping channels and capacities that would obviously enable trade to go beyond the U.S. Again, those won't be something that happen immediately and overnight. So seeing that in the short term, no, a lot of people are not going to see that. However, the other area that I know they pumped more money into was the Business Development Corporation, which essentially is helping folks like your friend expand to other markets and through exports, lending currency, all of that advisory related relationships that would help them try to navigate into other jurisdictions in order to build different ties to the extent that their products are impacted by the U.S. tariffs. So again, nothing I don't believe in the short term. Again, a lot can change with the U.S. Midterm elections next year. So, will that result in anything favorable on the Canadian relationship side? And as we go down to renegotiate the USMCA, I'm not banking on a lot. But again, populist and support for the Republicans can maybe sing a very different um, sort of theme.
The federal government, a lot of the industries have been held. The development field has been hit pretty heavily. All the condo markets have been frozen. There's an abundance of condos. There's a lot of people sitting with a lot of land across the country. A friend of the show and a friend of the community, Anna Byla, got appointed as the new housing czar. She got a 5-year appointment where she is going to be handing out funds for affordable housing across the country. And it is an interesting formula where there's a lot of people sitting with a lot of land that they can't afford based on the economy to build it, especially on the affordable housing side. So she's going to be looking at all kind of opportunities across the country. I know she's made some announcements with Olivia Chow on some of the areas in Scarborough and that kind of stuff there. And I know that they're going to be rolling out these funds. These moves by Carney putting in people like Anna Byla, which I think is a great thing to do. Do you think there's political components to it, or is there actually a real sense of trying to take this tax dollar and roll up where the economy is maybe a little bit soft and helping the economy keep moving?
Well, don't get me wrong. There's politics and a little bit of horse trading when it comes to how those funds can be dispersed effectively and efficiently. There's no doubt affordability was a huge concern leading up to the federal election, and obviously we've seen a huge softening in the real estate market as a whole. Areas like in Toronto and on the condo side, certainly a lot of those prices have fallen. There's a lot of inventory up there, up to maybe 2-3 years worth of inventory, which it's a lot. And again, getting the model right in order to deal with how we're going to meet our growth and productivity increases. Certainly, we need strong infrastructure, and affordable housing is one of those things that we need to have. I mean, how can you drive economic increases? Obviously, we need our GDP to grow to bring our debt ratios down. Very troubling if that can't be done. And again, 2 levers. One, increased affordable housing and how that model is going to look and that rollout. Obviously, it's been done provincially and municipally to look at those programs. 2, obviously, a lot of the big drivers with putting a lot of pressure on our housing market, obviously, was immigration. And as you saw in the budget, Mark had made some from pre-election platform statements about managing immigration more effectively. Number one, keeping permanent resident status granting around $380,000 a year. And then 2, looking at temporary workers, which was the largest driver of what we saw. And clearly that was having a big impact on not only housing and affordability, but also on our healthcare system. And again, he's wanting to keep that number down to about 5% of overall population, which is interesting because right now it's around 7 and so change percent as temporary residents. They want to go for about 675,000 people a year down to around 380 again. over the consecutive future until obviously we can absorb that, and until we have large increases in our infrastructure and housing affordability, it's a little hard to drive growth in our economy and obviously the workers and population without having that in there. So yeah, I think there's going to be a huge focus on that for sure.
Joe, I just want to touch a little. We kind of brushed over tariffs. Ford obviously in the last little while came out with these commercials quoting Ronald Reagan how tariffs were bad. As much as there was pros and cons to the commercial, and was good cop bad cop between Carney and Ford, a poll came out in the last couple of days that those commercials did not affect Ford's popularity. In fact, it helped him. He's over 51% in the polls in terms of popularity. Trump obviously is using these tariffs globally, not just hitting Canada. Yeah, he's playing this law back and forth with Canada. But we saw this the automotive the area get hit most recently in terms of some shutdowns, that kind of stuff there. You hear the fact that tariffs are affecting us a little bit here and there. What's your take in terms of the short term, long term, whether these tariffs are going to really impact us, or is it just something that we have to deal with and try to make some adjustments along the way?
Well, there's no doubt. I think tariffs are going to be part of the economy going forward. It's funny you touched on the impact with regards to that publicity campaign the Ford government put out on tariffs. I heard one great quote. I don't know if it was Andrew Coyne or otherwise, talking about throw a pebble into the lake, and if you don't hear a splash, there's really no impact. So was there a splash? Yeah, certainly there was. And I think, some people can criticize and say, that was the wrong move. You're poking the bear. I kind of think, it's important to get a messaging out there that, these do have significant impacts on the everyday person's livelihood and the ability for people to make ends meet and affordability. And I think just raising that awareness, irrespective of bipartisan related views, I think is something that obviously should continue to happen. And again, until people feel that hit an impact in their wallets on what does a closed market economy with high tariffs really going to do, for them in their benefit, or if they don't see any benefit that comes to them, I think they'll be the largest screamers, and those will be the ones that obviously drive if there's any change. And again, what will happen with those tariffs being reduced down to a lower amount. There's no doubt they want, everybody's economy, everyone wants their economy to do well and to build investment and attract jobs, build industry and foreign investment, et cetera. And, this is a tactic in order to give that hand slightly better hand to the U.S. in doing so. So, no, I do think our steel, our aluminum, and our auto trade sector are going to be feeling a different hit in terms of its relationship with the U.S. Henceforth, I think, finding other markets for those products. I also think, making sure whatever we're doing in the Canadian procurement side, whether it's provincial, federal, or municipal, that we are using our own Canadian products in doing so. So again, for defense spending and what have you, make sure we're sourcing it from Canadian suppliers. Because do we really want to go without those industries? Meaning they can't obviously make it a profitable return on production in Canada, and therefore we lose out in the long term. So no, we do have to do something, and I think trade relationships where other markets don't have that. Even this morning, the Chinese. Had mentioned that they were resuming diplomatic relationships and ties with the Canadian government. So what that looks like in the long term, in terms of pursuing other opportunities to help our industries, we'll see.
Listen, I mean, wherever there's a negative, there's a positive. I think this tariff and this Trump bashing has brought us closer together as a country.
Yeah, you've said.
Carney, I think he's on the right wave in terms of going out globally and trying to expand our relationships globally and see if we can do our own kind of stuff there. I think there's some an interesting the economy in terms of us coming together, which I think is probably the most positive overall. We're gonna have to tighten our belt up because it's getting difficult everywhere. But 2026 seems like we should all be cognizant and conscious of our budgets, where to spend that money, how to spend it. But also the flip side, Joe, sometimes there's great opportunities in a market. If you're sitting all over the cash, whatever, there are some opportunities. But for the average person, tighten the belt, I guess, and be careful with your spending. Is the way to go.
Yeah, fiscal prudency when there's long-term volatility and uncertainty, absolutely. And some people talk about there being a bubble in U.S. market valuations, et cetera. Who knows? I think to the extent somebody's fortunate enough to have savings and look for opportunities for investment. Again,
Yeah.
I think that's going to be something to take into consideration in a macro environment, and work closely with your advisor and look for what obviously makes sense for your short and long term goals.
Just a final financial question. I got to ask you this before we go off. We have a new mayor in New York City, and the big number one capitalist city in the world, New York City, has now a socialist running the city, and everybody's talking about Miami being the next New York City. A lot of folks moving money out of New York, et cetera, et cetera. What's your take in terms of Mondami being the new mayor of New York City, and do you see that capitalist New York City making a move out of New York into, say, Miami?
It's an interesting question. Honestly, it was an interesting campaign, and
I know you didn't expect me to ask.
I wasn't 100% sure that he would pull it off. But again, this just shows you how social fabric and views and what matters and what's important and capital can move, right? And so you look at sort of the changing environment in terms of social fabric, competitiveness, et cetera. I mean, I know quite a few financial institutions which have moved their head offices or significant large part of their operations to other states. Cheaper affordability, attracting talent, et cetera. So yeah, I mean, flight of capital, it can move where opportunities and certainly everybody wants to do things competitively, and I think New York has to be careful if they want to continue to be a financial center of the United States. And again, things can change. I mean, views, social, sentiments, et cetera. So can drive a lot. And sometimes you got to see the signs on the wall and be in front of it as opposed to being left behind.
Joel, thanks for coming on our quarterly show. That you come on and give us an update on the budget and what's coming on the pike on the financial markets, et cetera, et cetera. And looking forward to catching up with you on the next program. Hopefully we'll have a lot more nicer or better things to talk about on the economy. But listen, we're living in an environment that it's a day-to-day move, and appreciate you coming on the program and give us a bit of an insight.
No, I appreciate it. Thank you very much, Vince.